Hello, everybody. So we will work on our yoga pant variation today. And there are a few things you need to consider before we start working on the pattern. So first of all, we will start with our jean sloper that we made before because it's already a little more tucked in, like it's a little more fit and more like smaller, narrower. And that's the better way to go because it will be even more narrower. One thing to consider when we make yoga pants is the choice of fabric. So you have to make sure that you use knit fabric, no woven material, because woven doesn't stretch. And a yoga pant is so comfortable because it is stretchy material. So basically we have two different kinds of stretch. One is a two-way and one is a four-way stretch. Two-way means it stretches only left and right, and a four-way means it stretches left and right and lengthwise. So if you take like a two-way stretch fabric, if you don't know, I mean, it doesn't say anywhere. So you really need to just grab the fabric and try it. So you grab the fabric and pull it, you know, really hard. So this stretches nicely, very easily left and right. But lengthwise, you know, I cannot or hardly cannot stretch it, only like a tick, you know, and this is a two-way stretch. This is the perfect material for a dress or a t-shirt or anything like that, but not for pants. On the other side, we have the four-way stretch. So as I said before, it stretches left and right really nicely. And it also stretches lengthwise, like really nicely. A little less than sideways, but way better than this one here. So you will realize, like once you have that material in front of you, you know the difference. So a four-way stretch is the way to go. Nothing but that. So another consideration we have to have when we talk about the yoga pant is the style. So ignore the numbers here, just look at the drawing here. So I decided to make full length yoga pants with a flared bottom here. So it flares out really nicely. And what I also wanted to have is a casing, meaning it's a double fabric at the top where we then can put in an elastic or something. So I decided to do this like in a 3/4 width. So it's 3/4 high that we will add on to our pattern later. And I also decided to have the flare about 2 inches on each side. So it flares out really nicely. So, but you can do whatever you want. You can do a less flare, or you can do it just totally fitting like the legging style. Or, you know, like you can do different length. So I have a full length down to the ankle. You can do it shorter, like just knee length or calf length, whatever you want. So these are my choices here. I encourage you to do the casing around 3/4 of an inch or maybe an inch at the most, but not longer or wider than that. It's just the style of the pant pattern doesn't fit better when it's too wide or too narrow. So then we look at our numbers. What we did when we measured our body is, and we look at the waist, the low hip, the thigh, and the knee. These are the most important numbers for that we need for the yoga pant. So the waist was 34, and I divided it by 4, ended up with 8.5. I divided by 4 because we have 2 front pieces and 2 back pieces. So that's why we need 4 panels. With the low hip, it's similar. I have 43 divided by 4 is 10.75. I divided by 4 because we have 2 of those in the front and 2 of those in the back. Different will be at the thigh and at the knee because we only have 1 front and 1 back, and then 1 front and 1 back on the left side. So my thigh measurement was 20.5. That's why I divided only by 2 because we have 1 front and 1 back. So it's 10.25. And then I have my knee measurement, 15.5 divided by 2 makes it 7.75. So these are the measurements that I ended up with. Now we take our pattern and we measure those things that we have here, because it is not what it says here. So don't be alarmed or anything. So it's totally fine. So at first we measure our, so I'll put the back away for now. We have less confusion here on the table. Put this here. So at first we look at our waist, and I work on the front first. So my waist, and I measure this here, and I did that before, of course. It's 10.25. So I measure from one outside point to the other outside point. So 10.25. I write that down here, the red. Then I measure my low hip. That is usually the widest point of your whole pattern. So it's 11.75. So this is my red number right here. And I go down to the thigh. I measure 10.25. And then I measure my knee. It's 8.5. Okay, so that's what I wrote down here. I have my measurements. And you see that they are not the same as what we had calculated. So now we want to calculate it into the right measurement. And that means for the waist, we had 10.25, and it should be 8.5. So we divide 10.25 minus 8.5. So I end up with 1.75. So we do the same with our low hip. 11.75 minus 10.75 ends up with 1 inch. With the knee, with the thigh, it's same calculation, 10.25, and then I should have 10.25. So this one happens to be exactly the same. In my case, maybe you have a little discrepancy, so you calculate it the same way. You calculate the red number minus the blue number and then write down whatever it is here. Then we do the same with the knee, 8.5, but I should only have 7.75. So the difference is 3/4 of it. So we will take that difference and take it in on each side. And that means this difference we have to divide by 2, because we have a left and a right here. So we will take in, let's say from the knee, we take in a little bit on the left, a little bit on the right. It should be the same. So that's why we divide 3/4 by 2. That means 3/8 of an inch will be on the knee. On my low hip, it was only 1 inch divided by 2, it's half. So that means at the low hip, I have to go in 1/2 inch. And on my waist, it's way more. It's almost an inch, because we have 1.75 divided by 2, and that means 7/8 of an inch. So almost an inch on each side. And the reason for that is because we have our dart. So we will not use a dart. We will totally eliminate that dart for our yoga pant. Because like a general rule is we do not have darts with stretch or knit fabric, never ever. Because knit fabric, when you make a dart in that and you sew it and then it stretches out, it looks awful. It never hangs right, it does not look right. So that's why the knit fabric always stretches around shapes. So that's why knit patterns are usually way easier to cut, way easier to sew, way easier, way cheaper. Everything is really cheap with knit. So that's a very general rule. But now let's start working on our pattern itself. So I put this aside So I can see it, you don't have to, I will remind you what I did here. So at first, I start with my front piece. I will mark my points as I go. So I'll start here on the center. So this, where the crotch point, that's always my center. Where it's rounded, this is always my side. So at first I crossed out my dart. This will go. So I start here, this is point A, and this is point B. Then I go all the way down to the bottom, to my base. Where B is on my side, that will be C. And on my inseam here, that will be D. And what I also have here as a given point is my crotch point. This is point E. So this is my first rule of thumb, you know, like how you should like just mark your pieces here. What I also have marked earlier when I copied is that this is my waistline, this is my low hip, crotch depth, my thigh, my knee, and then all the way the base. So our first point that we do is that we take in our crotch point. Remember when we had our regular sloper and we made the jean sloper, we took it in already. Now we take it in another ½ inch. And this will be our point F. ½ inch right here. And this is my point F. Very nice. So then we go up to our waist. And as I said before in our calculation, I had 34 inches all the way around, divided by 4 is 8.5. The discrepancy from 8.5 and this here is 10.25 is 1 3/4. So I need to take in 7/8 on each side. So I'll do that. 7/8 here and 7/8 there. And this will be G and H. G and H. Then I do the same on my low hip. I go here, I look at my calculation for the low hip. We said it will be ½ inch on each side. So I mark ½ inch and ½ inch out here. G, H, that is I and G. So this is I and this is G. Then we go to our thigh measurement. For that, we don't have, like in my case, you know, I just use my outside points here. E, J, that's K and L on the outside. And then on my knee, I go in 3/8 of an inch. 3/8 of an inch and 1, 2, 3/8 of an inch. And that is M and N. So now we have our main points. We will talk about the below the knee area later. First, let's finish up the above the knee area. So now you can see we have all our points. Some are further in, some are further out. But that's pretty much all I need. And the only thing I need to do now is connect them. And I try to connect them, you know, with the longest possible stroke. Sometimes it works and sometimes I just do it in 2 steps, that's fine. So this one works here pretty good. Go to L, and then from L I go to N. This is pretty much a straight line here. Okay, then we do the same on the inside. I connect maybe this with a hip curve. If you don't have that, then use your French curve and do it in steps. So go this way around. And then I connect K and F. Then I also connect F, I, and G. F, I, and G. So, and you see that the black outline here is more curvy than my paper. And the curviness has two reasons. One is that we took away the dart, so it really shapes around the hips nicer. And the other is that my body shape is curvy. Oops, sorry. So my body shape is very curvy, so this shows more in those adjustments. So if you have a more straighter body or less curve, you know, it might not be so extreme, but that's how it is. Everybody is different, and that's why we do those custom made patterns, so it really fits you the best. I'm just connecting those points here a little better, so it's a little less edgy. So this is the shell, and now we talk about the negative ease. The negative ease is that stretch that we have in our material. So if we would cut this now in our stretch fabric and sew it together, it would be too wide. Because what we want is, this is our body measurement here, and we want to have the yoga pant tugging it, meaning this needs to be stretched a little to tug it. And that stretch is our negative ease. And how we do that is that we take our pattern here and we take 1.5 inches in on this side, the whole length of it. And for this, I put it sideways and get a smaller ruler here. I set it to 1.5. And this is, I mean, this looks so substantial. It's a really big measurement here, or a big adjustment. But we do that from our newly created line. We go 1.5 inch in. And all the way down to our knee. So that's what I'm doing right here. Okay, and then I connect those. So then these are our new points that we just created on the hip. We have our new point here, and that will be LMNO. And on the knee, we have point P. So you see how much narrower this is compared to what we had before for the jean pattern. So this is all our negative ease here, and that is the adjustment for the measurement. So now our next step would be to do the flare on the knee. And in order to do the flare, I need to have more material or more pattern paper around here. And what I do, I will just, let's see, 2 and 2 should be fine. I will just add another piece of this paper here, and I just tape it underneath. So that's the quickest way. Underneath would be best because then you can see your markings that you have on top. Just be careful to have it kind of centered because I want to have 2 inches, you know, on each side. So okay. So the first thing that we want to do is we will create some helping lines down from P and M to our baseline. And let's see, where is, oh, here it is. To square down a line. So you can use the knee line, or if you have the calf line or the baseline, you know, just make sure that it's in a 90-degree angle to this line that you chose. And in order to make it a little less confusing, I make a dotted line. Same here. And I will move this a little up because it's longer. And you go all the way down to the base. Both sides. And it's kind of interesting to see that one side kind of sticks outside of my pattern versus the other is inside my pattern. So kind of a little odd, or it looks odd, but it's totally fine. And then I will just square off my base again to make it more visible. So these are the 2 points that I just created here on my base, and I will extend those 2 inches to the outside because that's what I want, those flare to be 2 inches. So I'll use my ruler and just add 2 inches here and 2 inches there. Right at the corner, I'm lucky. So, and then I can basically connect those 2 points with my points M and P. We do that with my longer ruler here. So now you see how it flares out to my bottom here. What I see now that I want to adjust or address is these points here. They are a little too edgy. I don't like that, so I will round them a little to make them softer. And it can be 1/8 of an inch or almost 1/4 of an inch, as long as it's a nice softer flow. You don't want to have any edges, especially not around the knee. So that would be weird when you cut out the fabric and sew it. So I'll cross out the inside here. So this is my flare, looks good. And now we can work on the casing on top, and then we're done. It's a very quick pattern to do, actually. So what we do for the casing, I said that before, I decided to do a 3/4 of an inch casing. So I will also add a piece of paper at the top, and it should be fine to just use the width of it. Just tape it underneath. So the casing is parallel to our waist. So it should have the same curve here. At the front it is curvy, in the back it is a very straight line. So, but we want to have it exactly the same, just 3/4 of an inch above it. So what we need to do here is to extend the lines, but we have to basically not just go straight up here and straight over there, because then it gets smaller and smaller. So if we continue this line, you know, it gets narrower, and if we then flip it down, it would be too narrow. And you might have done that mistake by just flipping over, you know, the top of your pants, and then it doesn't fit really well. So what we want to do is we want to mirror image this part up to there. And the way to do it is, it's also very simple. So we use the waist, that part of the waist, as a straight line here, and then we see how much it really differs to our center line here when I go down 3/4 of an inch. So I can see this, and I do that in a little thinner line, so not to crowd it too much. At first, I would go to my uppermost point here, G, and then I square down a straight line, like a helping line, and only like an inch long or so. And I do that in a, like a dotted line. The same with O. I square down a line here, a helping line from O down, that's about an inch long. So I mark 3/4 of an inch. Where is my 3/4 of an inch point? It's right here. Same here, 3/4 of an inch, because this is the casing. This is the size of the casing. I don't want to go further down than that, 3/4 of an inch. And what I do now, I measure from my point to my line. So from my helping point here to my line out here, it's 2/8, the 1/4 of an inch. So this is 1/4, 1/4 of an inch. And here, if I measure, it's only 1/8 of an inch, so it's 1/8. So then I go upwards and copy the same thing. I extend my helping line straight up, also 1 inch. I measure, I mark my 3/4 of an inch area, and then I add 1/8 of an inch to the outside, because that's how much it differs. And this is where I need to go from here, from G. Then we do the same here. I extend my helping line 1 inch to the outside. It's the same line, I just make it longer. I mark my 3/4 of an inch, and then I know I have to go out 1/4 of an inch from this point. And that will be my new point here. So I can do that either with my straight ruler, or because it was kind of very curvy on that area, I do a curvy on the my new casing line here. Just a slight curve. So it really mimics my my pattern piece. And then I connect those 2 points also with my ruler. I will try to find the perfect matching spot so I get the same curve. So it's parallel to here, kind of like here. So I just move it up and connect it. So let's do this part. So this is my casing. It's 3/4 of an inch. So this is still our waist. The waist does not change. It's not that the waist is moving up here. It's basically the casing is flipping to the inside down here. So, and this is pretty much our pattern. So I will cut it out and then work on the back piece. The back part is basically the same thing. You have your measurements at what we measured before. That doesn't change. You divide it by 4, the waist and the low hip. You divide by 2, the thigh and the knee. So you will get that number. So we already have that. The only thing that changes is this part, the red number. The red number, because you have to go in and measure your back part, the back piece. For the back, your waist is a different number. Your low hip is a different number. So this will be changing, and then the calculation changes accordingly. But you basically, you do the same thing. You take in the crotch point, a 1/2 inch. This is industry standard. And then everything else, you just calculate it the same way here. And do the back part. So, and then you have both pieces. You can match them up really nicely. You can true it up by putting, you know, the back part and the front part on top of each other. See if the side line is parallel, if it's really matching up nicely. And then you're ready to go. So I will cut this out and then we're done. Thank you.